This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'd like to call the village board for Tuesday, January 12th to order. Roll call, please, Chris.
Kardowski,
Here.
Hall,
Here.
Kubaki,
Here.
Williams,
Here.
Krieger,
Here.
Flukie,
Here.
and Chris Zerbel is excused.
Okay, please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please remember our men and women throughout the world in uniform. I have one change to the agenda. I would like to take item B and move that first, so we can take care of that item first. With that, I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Gary Paul, seconded by Tracy Flukie to accept the agenda as amended. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Motion carried. Number 5, comments from the public must be limited to items not on the agenda, must state name and address, limited to 5 minutes. The board's role is to listen and not discuss the item. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individuals named, and the board is not able to take action at this meeting. We have no public here, so we will move on. 6B, requested release of right of first refusal for 941 Wabi Lane, parcel VA-228-14-K-59. Aaron.
The request you have in front of you is for the BP station at the corner of Wabi Lane and Allied Drive. When the property was initially sold from the town of Ashwaubenon back in the early 70s, there were a series of restrictive covenants that were recorded with all the properties at the time. And a copy of those covenants are attached to your staff report there. One of the covenants, number 12, does require an opportunity for the former town, now village of Ashwaubenon, to repurchase the properties as a right of first refusal. This was something that I guess I was not aware of, and it came about as a result of a proposed sale of the BP station. Title company contacted me about it. Within the documents, it does allow for a formal offer to the village, and if we don't act within 90 days, the offer is considered null and void, and they can move forward with it. However, in this case, it seems more timely to just take action on it with this property right now, and then bring forth a formal resolution in the future to release these properties from the right of first refusal for the village. I'll be happy to answer any questions for you that you may have.
Aaron, can you tell me what the plat includes? What is the industrial park in the first edition? What does that all encompass? What lands over there?
That's one of the questions that I need to determine before I would. Initially, I thought I'd bring forth the resolution at this time, but I really need to research where exactly the boundaries of those properties are, so I can give you a good idea of where that is. In this case, this would just be for the BP property.
Right. I was just asking because to know the whole plat before you start releasing them all, if there's any reason that there was some that we did not want to release for some reason.
Right, and that's what research we'll have to do for the future resolution.
Aaron, I've seen a lot of properties come and go in that area. How come this is the first one we've ever seen? Is it
Great question.
back to Tracy's question?
I'm not sure if it just never came up in the title search, or I guess what the reason is it never came up. I couldn't tell you. The covenants predate me in many ways.
No, you see,
So-
1972.
Not me.
Few of the people I know, but not all of them.
Yeah. Well, I had a call from the village president, and she called me, and I was up north, and she wanted to know if I knew anything about it. And I'm thinking, I'm scratching my head, and I'm thinking, Jesus, was it something to do with Menards? Was it something to do with development over there in TIP 3 or TIP 2? And I'm thinking, I'm scratching my head, and when I got the document, and it said 1973. That was my first year in college, for crying out loud.
I know, when I saw that, I went, oh boy, Steve's going to think I'm nuts for calling him on this one.
Well, you had me thinking. That's a
Yeah.
good thing.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Is there any value to this property for us in any fashion or format? I don't think we need to be getting into the realm of accumulating properties per se. That's best left to the private sector. And, when commercial comes, commercial decides how they're going to do it, what they want to do. I don't, and it's a gas station. I'm not sure that, is there anything you can see, either you or Joel, that makes sense for us to reacquire that?
I did check with Doug and Steve just to see if there's any engineering reasons, whether it's for street realignment, utility reconstruction, whatever it might be. And they saw no reason at all why we would want that property. And I would personally agree with that.
Thank you.
Steve, I was thinking of the same thing, there's good profit in car washes, and there's a great car wash there, so maybe we could generate some revenue there.
You better be careful to have us working there,
We all need something to do. All right, I'll make a motion to, what do we want to say, release the parcel VA-228-14-K-59 from the village of Ashwaubenon.
And I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Gary Paul, a seconded by Jay Krieger to approve the release of parcel VA-228-14-K-59 for the right of first refusal. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is consider, discuss, or act on the COVID-19 infectious disease response plan. So this plan pretty much lays out what the CDC has recommended, and we pretty much have been following this, but some of the guidelines changed on December 31st. This puts it all in writing, and Joel will be meeting with all of the village staff to go through the plan, so it needs to be adopted by the board. So, okay, Joel.
Madam President, are we a little late in doing this?
No, like I said, what we did is we were following the CDC guidelines. We just didn't have them physically written down that everybody, that was actually approved. So,
Okay.
okay. Joel.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. To answer Gary's question, I think certainly we could have been maybe earlier to the punch, so to speak, in drafting this document, but I think there are other concerns and challenges that the village is facing throughout this past calendar year. Coupled with that, there have been some recent changes in the expiration of certain laws and acts at the federal level that have had an impact as to the overall design of this plan. In particular, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act expired at the end of the year, and then most recently, the president did sign new law right at the end of 2020 that had some impact in the overall plan design. As the president had indicated, the purpose of this plan is basically to put in writing our response for how we were going to manage the COVID-19 pandemic, and as a result, really what this is kind of a hazard communication plan related specifically to COVID-19, puts into writing policies and procedures that we will follow for all of our employees, regardless of the department or the service area that they're in. Interestingly, we have employees that are routinely exposed to the virus, whether it be at work or at home or through other social settings. And because of that exposure, there's a level of response that we have to provide in order to mitigate the risk of exposure to others. In addition to that, we have employees that test positive, so we have to make sure that we follow proper protocols from that standpoint. Ultimately, what this plan will do is help identify potential occupational exposures to COVID-19 for our employees, ways we can mitigate risk for our agency or organization, and methods to appropriately and timely manage those risks and those exposures. So what we plan on doing, as Mary had mentioned, is we'll be meeting meeting with each employee group. Starting tomorrow, we'll be meeting with public safety and parks and recreation staff. We have meetings set up with all of our administrative staff, as well as time set up with our employees in our public works shop. And we'll be going through basically this kind of training format. Ultimately, the plan identifies what COVID is. Some of this stuff is going to seem rather elementary because we've been eating, breathing, sleeping COVID for the last 12 months now. So we'll be covering that again, just to make sure that we're clear. We'll talk about the various symptoms to make sure in case you are living under a rock the last 12 months and don't know what COVID is, here are the basic symptoms of that disease. We talk about how COVID-19 has affected our workplace, whether it be related to absenteeism from employees, but also service and operational adjustments and changes. If you recall, very early on in the pandemic, the Village Hall was actually closed for a period of time, and that altered how we operated and served our citizens. There were changes in how we operated, from staggering shifts and work schedules and things of that nature. And depending on how the pandemic continues to play out, those issues could arise again if we continue to go down a poor path. We also need to identify within our employee pools which ones are at higher risk or rate of exposure. And so OSHA has identified basically 4 exposure levels within their plan. And so we've taken that information directly from OSHA to apply to our agency. We do have employees that are considered high risk, and those would be primarily our fire, EMS, and rescue staff. So because they are handling medical type situations and providing care in a medical standpoint, they're at a higher risk of exposure. Medium risk would be public works, just because they have a substantial amount of public face time, if you will, working in the public. They don't necessarily know when or where they're going to encounter somebody with COVID-19 or that risk, so they're considered medium risk exposure. And then most of our employees here in the offices are considered a lower risk. There are enough engineered type controls in place, social distancing, spit barriers, face coverings, things of that nature in place to lower that overall exposure risk. Ultimately, we identify the ways to mitigate risk. These are, again, directly coming from the Centers for Disease Control. So we'll go through that with our employees. We'll talk about different measures that we will take up in order to control the infection. So obviously, sick employees or employees that have have exposure at home are going to be asked to stay home. We're going to practice social distancing. Face coverings are going to be required in certain circumstances. We have flexible work sites. So we do have employees currently that, depending on their situation and their personal impact to COVID, may have a flexible schedule, or they might be able to telecommute. So we'll continue to offer that as an opportunity. And then from a housekeeping standpoint, just making sure things are being cleaned appropriately in accordance to the guidelines. We talk about the different methods of response. So employees that are exhibiting symptoms, employees that maybe aren't exhibiting symptoms but test positive, and then what happens for employees that may have had a close contact scenario, either with somebody at home or maybe somebody within the general public. And so the requirements that we have identified here for those 3, again, come directly from the CDC. And of these 3 items here, as it relates to a symptomatic individual, a positive test case, or a close contact, those guidelines for return to work have changed, and those kind of really evolved over the course of these last 12 months. And so the information that we have today is current, but we also recognize that as this pandemic continues to evolve, we may need to change those again to reflect those standards. One of the key things to this particular policy that changed at the end of this year is related to the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, which provided 80 hours of paid sick leave to all full-time employees or eligible employees. And that particular act expired at the end of this last year. Now, under the new act that was approved and signed by the president on the 27th of December, the conditions for leave remained in place. However, the federal government did not provide financial reimbursement, if you will, at least to public employers. So there are tax benefits that private employers can entertain to provide that additional sick leave benefit. But from a public employer standpoint, we don't receive any reimbursement from the government, from federal or state government, to supply that. So ultimately, the choice is up to the local municipality or local unit of government to continue to provide the level of protection and benefit that the FFCRA provided, and provide a leave benefit to the employees should you decide to do that. And so under this particular policy, we will allow, if approved by the board, we would allow employees to take time off under the same conditions that FFCRA provided previously. However, the employee will have to use, if they wish to take this time as paid leave, use their accrued time off, whether it be sick leave, vacation, or compensatory time. And so they can still be protected under these 6 conditions. However, they would have to use their accrued time. In the event that something changes at the federal or state level, there's been some conversation about that. New administration comes into office here towards the end of January. Let's say they enact a new law and provide some reimbursement. That very much happened in the spring when the original FFCRA went into effect. They backdated the period. We could certainly go back and provide reimbursement should the state or federal government provide that benefit back to us as a local municipality. Ultimately, what we're looking to do is make sure that employees who are sick or exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19 do not come to the workplace. So we want to make sure we're encouraging that. Employees that need time off for various reasons, maybe they have a close contact situation, or they have a family member at home that is ill, or they have children that are in school and their school is shut down because of COVID, that they are provided those benefits. As part of the act that was adopted at the end of this last year, an employer can provide the protected benefits of FFCRA under that act without using traditional FMLA leave. And so the intent there is that traditionally here, if an employee's out for an excess of 3 consecutive days or more than 3 days, they have to use their FMLA leave benefit. And so that could become problematic later on in the year should something occur in that individual and they've exhausted a portion or all of their FMLA because of COVID-related action.
Say, Joel, let me interrupt there. Can you help me with how many days that is for the FMLA? And then also, how many days do they get as sick time in a year?
So sick leave is accrued based on a monthly basis, so they can accrue up to a maximum amount. I'll have to get that number off. I don't have that off the top of my head, but generally speaking, an employee, if they work 7.5 or 8 hours per day for 37.5 or 40-hour work week, they're going to accrue each month 7.5 or 8 hours a day for sick leave, and they can accrue that to up to, let's say, 1,200 hours in their tenure with the village. And so they could use that for any of those sick-related purposes. Family Medical Leave Act leave benefits will vary depending on whether you're going to use a state leave benefit or a federal leave benefit. And it depends on the circumstance, whether it's a direct cause, so the employees actually has their own health condition, or maybe their spouse has a health condition and you have to provide care for them. The most would be like a 12-week period under the federal leave. Now, that's not necessarily us paying them. That just protects their job and protects their employment with the village. If they have 12 weeks worth of accrued sick leave benefit, certainly it will be paid. But if they don't, they are protected and can take that leave unpaid as well and still be able to return back to their job.
Okay. Do we know if we have any exposure for some new employees that maybe haven't accrued as much sick time that this could be problematic to them? Because obviously they come down with it, we're talking 10 days automatic. It's bang, you know.
Yeah, yes, myself in particular, as an example, starting at the end of November, don't have a lot of sick time accrual. The fortunate thing is on the vacation side, you're basically bankrolled your vacation time at the first of the year. So any new hires that came in, like, for example, myself, I started at the end of November. I only have really 1.5 months of accrued time, but I received my full bank of vacation starting January 1. So in the event that I need to take some time off, I could certainly dip into my vacation time. Is that ideal? No, but that sometime is the breaks, unfortunately. I'm also not necessarily protected under FMLA because I have not met my tenure requirements in order to qualify. I'd have to be employed for at least 12 consecutive months in order to do that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And that's one of the risks that you take when you start a new job with somebody. So probably not the wisest to do during a pandemic, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm keeping my 6 feet of distance too.
There you go.
Again, we'll be communicating this policy and plan if adopted by the village board, and we'll begin those trainings this week. Again, ultimately, it's really kind of more of a hazard communication policy, making sure that our employees understand the hazards and risks related to COVID-19 and establishing some guidelines and policies for us to follow so that it's consistent across departments and employees. With that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Just to jump in quick to an item of note, just to follow up. The sick leave, while there are some grandfathering aspects of it, but generally speaking, the max accrual of sick leave is 150 days under our personnel policy.
No, I think these are extraordinary times, and I think it takes extraordinary means to address some of this. And this document, I think, is well done. And with that, it provides clear, concise direction to our employees. I think it's an excellent example of communication, which is important in any organization. And I think you did a real good job with that. All staff who was involved. And so with that, good job.
I just have a couple of questions, Joel. In here it talks about when an employee goes to a meeting or has a meeting, they're required to wear a mask. If they're going to a meeting, let's say Brown County meeting, are they required to wear a mask there? If let's say Brown County isn't wearing masks at their meetings, does the Village of Ashwaubenon employee have to wear a mask at that meeting, or are we requiring that?
Yes, under this policy, we're asking that employees wear a mask in those types of group settings. In particular, outside of the agency, we've had a conversation come up too about employees entering private establishments. We want to make sure that the employees are wearing face coverings under that circumstance as well. They go to a hardware store to get a part, something to that effect. Maybe a utility employee has to go in and do a meter exchange in a private residence. They would need to wear a face covering at that time as well. The one item that this policy does not address yet, because we have not gotten formal guidance or direction from either federal, state, or local authorities, is the requirement of face coverings for a vaccinated employee. So some of our employees are getting vaccinated currently, and the question has come up, is it required then to wear a face covering? At this point under our policy, we're saying yes. However, that is subject to be changed and for review based on recommendations from state, federal, or local authority.
If an employee has a medical reason that they cannot wear a mask, could you please go through that process and what would occur for them to get that medical exemption?
Sure. So we would look at it as kind of a reasonable accommodation request from that standpoint. So we would need some kind of certification from a medical provider indicating that they should not wear a mask for whatever medical purposes or reasons. It cannot be just simply a political reason why they just don't believe in face coverings and they don't want to wear it. They would need some kind of condition or reason that they could apply as kind of more of a reasonable accommodation request from that standpoint. There is certainly situations where an employee may request telecommuting or some other type of reasonable accommodation, maybe because they have some type of immune deficiency or something to that respect. That basically falls under our standard ADA compliance requirements in our personnel manual.
Okay, so then they would just go to that and they would have to follow those rules that are in our personnel manual.
Correct.
For that.
Correct.
That
We would view it largely as a reasonable accommodation request.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, one other question, Joel. I don't normally come through the front door. Do we have, entering this building, you're required a face mask?
Yes.
There's a big pamphlet at the front door with, I believe it's Aaron Rodgers on there, isn't it? I don't know, could be another quarterback from another team, I don't know. But anyway,
It's Kirk
there is
Cousins.
something on the front door stating wear a mask.
I'm just thinking to protect the employees within, and to make sure that the doors where we are entering from the public, that they have those signs so that people are notified that, hey, you got to wear it.
At the beginning of when the face coverings were recommended, the staff made signs and put them on all the doors.
Okay.
Are we going to perhaps have masks there too as well? I know some of the private sector businesses do that, and I'm just wondering, is that something we're going to do to?
And I apologize, I missed the first part of that question. Are we going to be providing masks? Is that the question?
Perhaps at the front door, if you don't have one, a lot of the, I think Fleet Farm and others have had masks there for those who come there and don't have masks. I'm just asking, from a procedural standpoint, whether that's something we would be doing.
I know we have masks available for our employees in the event that they forget theirs or don't have one available. I would presume that if somebody came in, that we would be able to provide them with a mask. I don't know that we necessarily have them out at the counter, do we? No.
I don't think so.
I don't.
Yeah, but we have them up front by the counter in order to provide one if necessary.
Just something to consider.
I understand this policy is for employees only, so it really does not apply to trustees or elected officials. But having said that, I would wish that our elected officials, our appointed officials would try to abide by this policy as much as they can when they're out, because they're also representing the village and, us supporting the staff by doing the things that are mentioned in this policy for them. Again, I know it's not something that's required of us, but I think it'd just be a good way to support our staff.
I know that when there is a medical condition, people don't wear a mask. And so I assume whenever I go into a store, that if somebody doesn't have a mask on, that it is for a medical. I work at the salon with a gal who she can't wear a mask. And so I didn't know that until she told me. So I just assume that they have a medical condition, so. Any other discussion? Okay, so I'm probably going to need a motion to approve the COVID-19 infectious disease response plan.
I would make that motion.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Jay Krieger, Steve Kabacki, a second by Jay Krieger to adopt the COVID-19 infectious disease response plan. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Of course, I'll second.
Motion by Gary Paul, seconded by Tracy Flukie to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
This conference is no longer being recorded.